Hi, Carolyn.
Hi, Dr. Rosensweet.
Hi, Carolyn.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Yes, sir. We're working. All right. Well, good morning to you. It's been far too long, as far as I'm concerned. And I have my questions, and I can answer this for you. You are ready for me, yes? Okay, good. Hoping you're well, hoping everybody's well. Good morning. Welcome. And let us commence. Number one. This question comes in from a woman in the Netherlands, and it's an interesting kind of conversation because she doesn't speak English, so we're going back and forth. It's interesting. This part is not though. She says, Dr. Rosensweet, I am really struggling. I'm 45. I've been on HRT the past 4 years, and I have experienced many awful menopausal symptoms since the age of 35. Guess she went into a full menopause early. Her main concern, though, seems to be neurological. Her memory is awful. She says, I suffer um, pulsatile tinnitus. My nervous system feels completely out of whack. I also have extreme sensitivity to all smells. And I'm wondering if you've ever come across this type of thing um, with any of the many women who you have treated over the years.
Um, let's see. You know, in general, we'd like to think that when women go into menopause and they've lost their ovarian hormones, or men go into andropause and lost testicular hormones, there'd be a relatively simple, hey, just replenish the hormones, everything's going to be fine. And that happens. There are some situations that are really easy to identify and treat, and people do terrific really quickly. That does occur, but I find it to be the exception.
Yeah.
First of all, we're midlife, and there's been a lot of water under the bridge, shall we say? So there's been a lot of adversities to health related to nutritional stuff, exercise stuff, toxicity and exposures, and also usually one of the most prominent things, a not totally functional response to the stress of life, so that the fight or flight is activated over and over and over again, and it really is tough on a lot of different systems for that to happen.
Yeah,
So
that
that
saber-toothed tiger. Go ahead, please.
so that's midlife, and then throw in the loss of very, very powerful and important biochemicals, the hormones that come out of the ovary or out of the testicles. And it isn't necessarily just a simple matter of replenishing those hormones. Though, again, sometimes it is. Sometimes you got relatively healthy people that lose the ovarian hormones. The hormones are replenished with skill and individualization, and women do really well. They get back on the horse, and that is actually a common thing. Sometimes it takes longer, though, than one would expect. I always think in terms of by the time a woman is reaching out for professional support, that means she's had some duress for a while, sometimes a long while. And it takes some care. It takes sometimes a month or two or 4 or 6 to really get things adjusted. And sometimes there's intricacies that really require the participation of an expert professional, someone who's really taken on um, hormone replenishing, really understands that women are different, men are different from one another, that it's imperative to really hunker down on the individual characteristics and the balances, and has had a lot of training and a lot of experience. And a lot of times it takes that. And I know that a lot of women have been frustrated that they go into menopause, they think it would be really not that complicated, and that it wouldn't be easy. And I think one of the most uncomfortable things that happens is that they don't have a good result, and they get frustrated, and they think that something's wrong with them, and
Absolutely.
and and feel bad, and triggers other issues that they may have, as we all have, around hopelessness. So the whole human Megillah, as they say.
The
So,
whole human Megillah. I'm going to write that one down.
but here's how I always love to approach this. Um, I love to start from scratch for someone who's had a rough time, and go through a regular process that involves an extensive questionnaire, so we get to learn a lot about someone. Sometimes there's some relevant testing, not hormonal testing, but relevant testing. But because it's almost never that anyone who really is specializing in this work runs into a case that they can't figure out. Is this the patient who was using estrogel too?
And I'll I'll just scan or something. I'm sorry that I'm
She was the one who was using estrogel, and she was on quite a substantial dosage. For those of you who understand numbers, she was on 3 pumps, which is 2.25 milligrams of estradiol a day. That's a decent dose, but it's a robust dose. And you really want to question that one. And what I love to do when someone's having a challenge like that is start from scratch, have them stop all hormones and start from lower dosages and gradually increase. And I don't recognize the progesterone that she's on, and we don't know her situation around testosterone, and we don't know her situation around sex hormone binding globulin. So there's a lot of missing information. But the bottom line, here's what I think her job is. Oh, there was one other thing. We were talking about adding the patch. Before I'd go into the patch, adding it onto a very robust estrogen dosage, I'd be reluctant to do that. I'd want to start from scratch again and start with a low dose of estrogel. First of all, have her come off the hormones, see what happens. If, for example, she comes off all hormones and she feels better initially, what that's a sign of is that she was on an excessive dosage. And as her body let go of some of the excessive dosages and the dosage of the estrogen that was on board in her body reduced, if she starts feeling better, that's almost living proof that she was on excessive dosages. And then the strategy is the same. We start low. If she comes off and she's feeling worse, then we go back to ground zero again. And I'd want to know some things around sex hormone binding globulin, just for the common things that make cases confounding until you uncover that one. So her job is to go shopping and find someone, hopefully, that is specializing. And Dr. Terry Hertoghe, Hertoghe, Thierry, is a medical doctor, and he's in Belgium.
Ooh.
And this medical doctor is an expert, and also knows how to do proper hormone testing through 24-hour urine hormone testing.
Right.
Sometimes we do that initially, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we start from scratch. But I would recommend that she reach out to Dr. Hertoghe. If she has trouble finding Dr. Hertoghe's contact information, Hertoghe, she can contact Sherry at the Menopause Method, and we'll give her some ways to contact Dr. Hertoghe. But yeah, it's time for an expert, time for someone who spends their professional days primarily treating women and men in menopause and andropause. Because what I'm going to assert, that even though it's been frustrating, there's a solution. And there always is, because healing is truly possible. And when you get into challenging medical situations, you think, oh God, I'll never figure this out and I'm just doomed. But many people have been there, and many people from that position of feeling hopeless have healed. And so, shoulders to the wheel, due diligence. The challenges have reasons. There's always reasons. And sometimes you got to go beyond just the hormonal issues. Sometimes there's receptor site issues, there's toxicity issues, there's intestinal issues that lead to toxicity issues that lead to liver problems. So the great news is, there's always reasons.
Well, what about the neurological thing? I get a lot of questions about the neurological thing. Is that like
Yeah.
conducive to?
Well, there's different types of neurological things.
Yes, of course.
If there's cognitive issues, a great place to start is solving the menopause, hormonal depletions. Tinnitus makes one wonder if that just came on later in her life. Is that related to the neurological issues? And that would be the realm of a different expert.
Yes.
And then if neurological issues mean tremors or convulsions or loss of nervous control of the lower extremities, for example, you have to bring in another realm of
Yeah.
experts. And often there's places where the hormones intersect with neurological issues. But when there's neurological issues, I love to call on a referral to someone who's really educated in something called the Bredesen protocol, Bredesen. And because when there's nervous system stuff, there's reasons for that as well. And someone who's spending day in and day out focused on the nervous system, the brain, etc., it needs their expertise. I myself reached a point, as interested as I was in all these different topics, I couldn't get my arms around all of them, and I had to specialize. I decided to specialize. Sometimes, when you say nervous system stuff or neurological stuff, that is not enough information.
No, it's broad.
Some
Yeah.
fall into the area of structural issues, where you've got nerve impingement or fascia tightening or muscle issues. So the good news is that there's a lot of expertise out there. And if you go on the path to try and sort it out, and who in the heck wants to do that? Everyone's got busy lives and lots of other places they'd rather spend their money. And so it's so hard to consider anything but a health issue a diversion.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute, I shouldn't have to deal with this. I got to deal with my career, etc. Yet, we're talking about how do you approach life itself. And one strategy is you embrace exactly what's going on, and you hold it to be significant and genuine and legitimate. There's a photographer in Asheville, where I live, and he's got this astounding photograph. You can look it up. It's Wall Gallery, Wall Gallery. He's got this phenomenal photograph, and he's not the only one. Other photographers have picked up on this as well. It's a buffalo in a snowstorm. And buffaloes know something that other animals don't, like cows, for example. If a herd of cows is caught in a snowstorm, they try and run away from it. If a herd of buffalo is caught in a snowstorm, they run towards it. They run right into it. And somehow they figured out that that's the quickest way out. is in.
Isn't that weird?
It makes a lot of sense.
It does.
That's going to be the shortest distance, and that's true for us humans. That if we respect exactly what's emerging in our day-to-day life, including health issues, and we move towards them and embrace them and take them on, and who in the heck wants to take on rough stuff? Yeah, it's a good strategy to take on rough stuff because that's where the growth is, that's where the improvement is. So I have done this in my own life in big time, and it's some of the best things that ever happened to me, even though in the moment I wasn't really thrilled about it. I would have liked to have been doing something else. And um, so at any rate, tough philosophy to swallow. You move towards what's giving you trouble, and if you do that, you're going to find answers, and your life will change for the better.
And I believe you. And I always love when you say healing is possible. Literally. There's someone out there. Sorry. There's someone out there. He has to say hello. Someone out there. It's kind of like the path of least resistance in a way, you know? You tussle with it. You just go get the help. So thank you very much for saying that again, because it's very hopeful. It's filled with hope. Um, and I think that yes, she's going to be happy with that answer, and I'll try and get more information, and we'll revisit this, at a later time. I appreciate that. My second question comes in, stating, I have been using the same hormones at the same dose since October 2022. The weird thing is that all of my numbers have changed over the year, but I haven't changed anything as to what I'm doing. My progesterone levels dropped, my estrogen went up, and my testosterone dropped. Is this normal? Um, Dr. Rosensweet, have you heard of fluctuations with hormones, even though a woman has been taking the exact same hormones, hormone wise, for an entire year?
Um, there's a couple possibilities, and this is the kind of thing that is best addressed in consultation with a provider who knows how to follow the bouncing ball and elicit the details, because there's so many details missing from this question and to be able to answer it properly. But there's some things that I think about. One is hormone levels. One issue is how are they being measured? And I'm going to assume that what's being done here is blood testing.
Mm.
So the first thing I would want to know is, when did the woman apply her hormones, and how long after she applied her hormones was the blood drawn, and was there variability between that? Because one thing we're unsure of, although our group is doing tests along this regard, is, are there steady states reached? In medicine, there's something called pharmacokinetics. It's how a medicine behaves once you swallow it or apply it to your skin, or inject it. So when you inject a medication, for example, into a muscle, very quickly you get a huge rise in the bloodstream, and then you get a rather rapid tapering off as it leaves the bloodstream and goes into the cells. Well, that also holds for swallowing a pill or applying something to the skin. When you apply something to the skin, you apply it, it goes in, and it's a little more gradual going in and going, leaving the bloodstream and going into the cells, but there's still a time variable there. Like, when did you apply your hormones? When did you draw the blood? And that's So that's my first issue there when she says hormone levels. The other thing that would be so relevant with her is to get the details of what she's calling fluctuations and what she's calling steady. Like what were her initial symptoms, and is she getting fluctuation in symptoms when over time? And the third thing is that I can answer from the information that I was given is sometimes, for example, if she's applying hormones to her skin, she is uh, what's happening is the skin itself, in some instances, can become saturated. And what originally worked as dosages no longer absorbs at the same rate because there's saturation of the underlying fat that's underneath the skin. It's called dermal fatigue by Dr. Jonathan Wright. And sometimes what you have to do if you're applying hormones topically is switch sites. So it could be as simple as she was applying topical hormones to her skin, and then that area that she was applying got saturated, and she has to switch and rotate sites. And I described this in the book that people can download. So that's what I can say dealing with the information that I was given.
Got it. Got it. Got it. That book, by the way, is called Happy Healthy Hormones. And all you need to do is write me and I'll send you the link. It's very easy. Wonderfully written by our dear Dr. Rosensweet. Um, okay. Well, thank you very much. Question number 3. Is there a specific progesterone number that is optimal for a woman to take to protect the lining of her uterus, just above board? Or is this just a very individual thing?
That's a great question. The answer is no. There is no specific number. And, progesterone, like all these hormones, they're universally effective all over the body. And so to come up with a progesterone number, you have to bear in mind a lot of different things. And yes, the lining of the uterus is very important. And one of the things that I did at one point was study, well, how much progesterone does it really take to coincide with a very thin uterine lining, which is what we're looking for. We don't want a thick uterine lining that can menstruate in most every instance, but not all instances. We want a nice thin one and a uniform one that's not overstimulated. Well, the traditional wisdom is it takes progesterone to suppress that uterine lining. And there is some wisdom to that. There is some relevance to that. But what we used to have in the menopause method was a mandatory annual transvaginal ultrasound.
Mm.
One of the things I like to do is correlate the thickness of the endometrial lining with the amount of progesterone a woman was taking, because conventional wisdom was you needed a certain robust amount of progesterone to keep that lining thin. And since we were testing everybody and we were giving every woman progesterone, we had a lot of data there. And I could not come up with a correlation. Some women need to have a lot of progesterone to keep them from bleeding. And other women who were not absorbing much progesterone at all had really thin uterine lining. And part of it is distance from last period. Like if you've gone years and years and years, there's going to be a thinness that's going to set in on that endometrial lining. Can that be overcome by way too much estrogen and not enough progesterone? Yeah, it can. So if this answer is blurry, there is no exact number. Now, let me approach it from a whole different way. I love to maximize the amount of progesterone a woman has for her sake, because progesterone is the only biochemical I know that supports the cells that lay down new bone. the osteoblasts, progesterone. And loss of bone is a very, very common issue. And yes, it's related to loss of estrogen, loss of testosterone, and other factors as well. But progesterone is one of those moving parts. And we like to optimize that. A lot of women, that progesterone is so critical for normal mood. And when some women lose their progesterone, they really get into emotional fragility that is quite disabling. Not all, but some do. And so we want to optimize the progesterone for that as well. And since progesterone seems to have a safety factor to it that's almost unheard of in medicine, you can really get robust on your progesterone dosages. Now, having said that, most women, you're not going to be able to give them too much progesterone. Progesterone is the great calmer. That means if I chose the right amount of progesterone and injected it intravenously in myself or you, Carolyn, or anyone, and we got the dose right, we could be put to sleep so deep, surgery could be performed on us. That's how calming it is. So it's very unusual to overdose on progesterone because, like, say, for example, if you take a super high dose of progesterone at night that's a little high for your body, you're going to wake up feeling groggy, like you're on an overdose of a sleeping pill or something. It's got that built-in safety factor, as many of these hormones do, because they're so strong. So when you get the right amount, they feel good. And that's not necessarily true of vitamin B, B1, let's say. A lot of people don't notice it when they take a multivitamin rich in B vitamins. They can't tell the difference. Some can, but that's pretty rare. That's not true of hormones. Most people who take hormones, you take too much of a hormone, there's big symptoms. So it's really challenging. The good news is it's hard to give an overdose of progesterone because women don't like it. For good reason. Its effects are too strong and too excessive. So we like to maximize progesterone. Really, what I always love to do is to individualize progesterone. Not in relationship to estrogen. We like to have the right amount of estrogen. We like the right amount of progesterone. And how do we determine progesterone? Well, we start out with a low dose of topical progesterone and jack it up until a woman gets symptoms of overdose. Or sometimes we'll turn to oral progesterone. And what we do in that instance is we give a woman a bottle of 25 milligram capsules, 30 of them. And we give a woman a second bottle at the same time of 75 milligram progesterone, 30 of them. And we usually start most women at 50 milligrams, so that's 2 of the 25s. We'll do that for 3 nights. See if it helps a woman sleep, see if it helps her mood. If she can't quite notice it, for the next 3 nights, we'll go up to 75 milligrams, thus 1 of the 75 milligram capsules. We'll do that for 3 nights, 2 nights, 4 nights. See how a woman does on that. What are we looking for? She's sleeping better, her mood is better, and she feels better. Anything else is unacceptable.
Well, yes.
She feels worse. There's something wrong. There's a pilot error going on there. So we're gradually increasing the doses of progesterone she takes at night. We have her take it at night because it can help with sleep so much. Some women take progesterone during the day just for the calming effect as well. So there's all kinds of intricacies to getting it right.
May I interject this from the chat, because we get this a lot. What if you can't tolerate progesterone? It is an, in caps, wicked stuff for me. Tried all forms, Such a bummer.
This happens. And progesterone seems to be unique amongst the hormones. There's a certain percentage of women, small, who do not seem to tolerate progesterone. But it's important to leave no stone unturned. For example, what we don't know is she's tried all kinds of forms. Yeah, what are the dosages being used there? Some women, it's just excessive dosages, whether it's topical progesterone or it's oral. So some women, we've gone way, way down. Like we start with a 200 milligram per milliliter topical progesterone. When we get it down to something like 10 milligrams per milliliter, and we apply a drop or two, the woman tolerates it. And so we're looking for the sweet spot. Is there any amount, just milligrams of progesterone per day, whether it's by mouth or by topical application, that the woman tolerates? The other things to look for with progesterone is she allergic to the progesterone itself? And there's a laboratory called Meridian Valley Lab, and you can send in some kind of specimen to see. They're able to ascertain whether or not the woman's having some kind of reaction to either the progesterone or the base that the progesterone's carried in. Because when you take progesterone or anything, you're not taking just progesterone.
Right.
You're taking like if it's in a cream, 95, 99% of the cream that's called progesterone cream is not progesterone. It's the cream or the gel or the oil that the progesterone's dissolved in. So sometimes you're having a reactivity to the base. So you got to try different bases. So here you go. It calls for the need of an expert, someone who really understands this, knows what to do about it, knows which laboratories to use to test it. There have been patients that I've let go and realized that progesterone, for some wild reason, just isn't theirs to do, which is really a mystery because a young woman has 100 times more milligrams of progesterone output than she does estradiol. So there was times if she was regularly menstruating, I emphasize regularly menstruating, that she was putting out 100 times more progesterone than she was estradiol, the most potent estrogen. So that's a big deal. So we know that the woman who regularly menstruating had a high tolerance, high acceptance, high need for the proper amount of progesterone. So like so many other things in auto mechanics or plumbing or artists or whoever it is, there's a lot of moving parts to consider. And what does it call for? You got to go to someone who's doing this day in and day out. That's your job. Find someone who's in your state. These days, all you need to do is find someone in your state who's licensed in your state, because by telemedicine, you can see anyone in your state who's licensed in your state. Nurse practitioner, physician. So go seeking out these people who are saying to the world, I specialize in hormones and menopause and andropause. Because you're going to need someone to help sort this out who's got some real expertise. I wouldn't give up on progesterone. There's one woman patient, this is 30 years, that she has to take a very, very low dose of progesterone 2 out of 3 days. If she takes it 3 out of 3 days, she'll get progesterone overdose symptoms. But she can tolerate that much. And no one's got a perfect regimen. Never mind what theory is. If you've gone to examine every possible thing that you can, and it turns out that you don't tolerate progesterone, well, there you go. there's a lot of other things related to living and breathing and walking and talking and doing our lives, then we've got to get progesterone 100%. We don't. There's a lot of resilience to human beings. So there's always a way to go through a process and come up with the right answer. And, you need a partner to do that, someone who's really has cared deeply about hormones and they know how to go on the journey to figure out what's going on. Some women don't initially do well with progesterone, and there's reasons. And it's pretty unusual that you can't eventually figure out a proper relationship to progesterone.
So there is hope. There is
Exactly.
hope. Yeah, that's a positive thing. Yeah, very much so. Thank you, um, very much for that. Um, estrone. Estrone has come up. So, Dr. Rosensweet, is estrone a hormone that one can bring down? My estrone runs high, and I'm wondering if this is a bad thing. And also, how is it that one might lower it? We talk a lot about estradiol. We talk a lot about estriol. We don't really talk so much about estrone, and I'm a little bit concerned about this estrone thing. Um, Wondering if you could expound on that a little bit.
Sure.
Thank
Um, every chemical in our body is part of a biochemical process in the sense that you eat foods that contain cholesterol, and as far as the ovarian hormones go, your body takes that cholesterol and chemically modifies it, then modifies it again, then modifies it again, almost through magic, and eventually changes it into estrogens. And wow, that's pretty wild.
you.
The estrogens themselves are related to one another. Like the most potent of the estrogens is called estradiol coming out of the ovary. And another hormone that is an estrogen that comes out of the ovary is called estrone. In fact, estrone can be made out of estradiol. In fact, when you measure the estrogens on 24-hour urine hormone tests, which is absolutely the gold standard, you see more than twice as much estrone is common than there is estradiol. Estrone is more prevalent than estradiol. It's only about 80% as potent. Estradiol is the most potent. And there's a third active estrogen. It's called estriol. It's only 1/8 as potent as estradiol. Everything's compared in potency to estradiol. But it's more prevalent than the sum of estrone and estradiol. Estriol is the most prevalent. In fact, if you add up estrone and estradiol, and you look at the estriol number, there should be more estriol, and there will be in a young, healthy woman, than there is estrone and estradiol. So I go into detail about this in the book. So when this woman is saying her estrone is up, all of these statements need to be investigated. There needs to be more information. On a normal 24-hour urine hormone test of a young woman who's regularly menstruating, we're going to see more estrone than we're going to see estradiol. And it's totally natural. So when she says her estrone is too high, I don't know what criteria she's using. Now, estrone has got some potency to it, And if it's so high that she's getting breast tenderness and nipple tenderness, that would be because she was overstimulating breast glandular tissue, too much stimulation from potency of estrogens. Well, we don't have that information though, so we don't know why she's saying she's got too much estrone. In treating women in menopause, you can make mistakes, pilot error, and you can raise that estrone too high. For example, if you give a woman too much estriol, just the way this biochemistry works, you can slow down the conversion of estrone and it'll build up. You get elevated levels of estrone. This isn't a common error. The best way to treat a woman is to give her biased, is to give her a combination of estradiol plus estriol. But if you give her too much estriol for her body, you can go so far as to raise the estrone excessively. The way that we detect that is in 24-hour urine hormone testing, and we see it occasionally. But the thing I don't know, because the questioner, there's just so much more information needed. How was the elevated estrone determined? Sometimes so I have to answer in general ways, which is a good start. Sometimes when we see elevated estrogens on 24-hour urine hormone tests that we really shouldn't see, like elevated estrone, we take a look at what's estrone supposed to become in the process of being utilized. Because when these hormones are utilized, they become something else, they convert. So, for example, estrone becomes something called 16 alpha hydroxyestrone in the process of being utilized. And the 16 alpha gets converted in the process of being utilized into estriol. If you got a really high estrone and a relatively low 16 alpha, or one of the other things that estrone can convert to, you start wondering about the liver. Why isn't the conversions proceeding properly? Do you have liver issues where your liver just isn't functioning up to speed? I'm going way out there on a limb, but these are the kind of things that functional medicine physicians and nurse practitioners, those who have studied the liver, the gut, how does it function? How does it get in trouble in this modern world? The liver can get in trouble in this modern world. It could get in trouble in the ancient world too by overconsumption of alcohol, big time. Nowadays, it can get in trouble from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of exposure to toxic chemicals. The liver has to process all that stuff. It's not easy.
It's an important organ. For
Not
sure.
easy to process all this stuff. And people tend to put burdensome challenges on the liver over the course of the lifetime. I myself have done this. So here's a question for people on their livers. Could you drink a cup of coffee at 6 o'clock at night when you were 20? And many people will say, oh, yeah, sure, I could have a cup of coffee with dinner, no problem. Could you drink a cup of coffee at 60 years old with dinner? You're going to find a lot of folks like myself are going to say, I wouldn't dare drink a cup of coffee because I wouldn't fall asleep.
I'm with you on that. Yep.
And the reason would be the liver is no longer youthful and no longer has the power of youth and isn't able to process the caffeine with the same speed and efficiency it did and dismantle the caffeine with the same speed and efficiency that it did when someone was 20, because the liver faced many challenges. many. So it just couldn't do as good a job. And sometimes, and you know this, Carolyn, because of what you're studying, and sometimes there's been changes in the health of the intestinal tract. And since the intestinal tract, the liver is downstream from the intestinal tract, the liver is picking up what the intestinal tract is not doing well with. So the knee bone is connected to the thigh bone. And I know this all started out with estrone, but how this actually plays out is when you go to someone who really has studied the biochemistry. This is going to take a physician or a nurse practitioner. They really studied hormones and hormone biochemistry. They're fascinated by it. They've taken it on as a specialty. And some physicians have gone even further. They've taken on, as part of that, the liver and how the liver functions in the intestinal tract. Someone's going to have the internal capacity, education, experience to sort out what this particular questioner is calling a high estrone. And I purposely sort of splayed out a lot of different possibilities to give you an idea of a lot of these things. To get them right, you just, like it or not, we have to consult someone who knows what they're doing, which is a good thing because you want someone who knows what they're doing because you're playing with the strongest biochemicals that exist in our body. I first faced this as a young man, and I mentioned it on our Facebook Live many times. I was fascinated with cars, and I loved to tune up my 1962 Volvo because there was two carburetors, and the way Volvo instructed tuning up these carburetors is you listened with a stethoscope to the sounds of the air moving through the throat of the carburetors. Oh, I just thought this was just fantastic, and I got interested in. I even rebuilt an engine in one of my Corvair vans, and I had it. Took me all winter to do it, and I had the van just every part splayed out in the garage and cleaned and put it back together, and that van ran for it started up when I put it all back together. It was astounding, and it only ran for 7,000 miles though, at which point it froze.
Oops.
And I had a hard lesson. And I learned the lesson when I wanted to have my Volkswagen van rebuilt, but this time I decided to not rebuild the engine myself. And I took it to a mechanic who let me watch him do it. It took him 2 days to do it. And I was just blown away by the number of steps that this mechanic, that's what he did. He rebuilt Volkswagen engines. He knew 1,000 million times more about rebuilding an engine, things I never even thought of in my handy just go rebuild your engine manual told me. So the good news is that people do specialize in things and get real good at it, and it takes a village. It takes a village, so go to your village hormone expert if you think you've got a high estrone and see what's really going on there and see if they should have an explanation. Number one, is that estrone abnormally high? Because there's 2 times as much plus estrone as there is estradiol. So long answer, and I have a hard stop. I've got 4 more minutes, so we probably have room for one more question. The labs that do the 24-hour urine hormone test is RHEIN, R-H-E-I-N, and Meridian Valley. These are the 2 experts in 24-hour urine.
Question here. Can a woman send in her own 24-hour urine and read it herself?
No. Good question. No. These are physician and nurse practitioner oriented labs. They must receive a request from a physician or nurse practitioner.
Got it.
I highly recommend it because it took me interpreting perhaps 200 tests with help before I really was able to grok and understand the many moving parts. The great news about a 24-hour urine hormone test is so detailed. There's so much information in there. The challenging news is, boy, when you first meet up with a 24-hour urine hormone test and you're taking a look at 15 different moving parts there, you go, wow. Takes a while.
It does. It does
You want a
indeed.
professional. You
Yeah.
want to do it.
Got it. Got it. Got it. So back to the doctor shopping. They're out there. Thank you. And it's doable. And for me, Carolyn Shapiro, I surely wouldn't want to try and read my own 24-hour lab. No way. Um, and therefore, we're very, very grateful to you, the doctors and NPs and NDs and PAs that you train. And yeah, I'm gonna let you off the hook a little bit early, Dr. R, because my other question is just gonna take you into next week.
All right.
um, but I'm gonna wish you a very early happy Valentine's Day from our home to your home, and a happy Valentine's Day to everybody. It's a very cool holiday as far as I'm concerned. And it's been really nice seeing you. And thank you so much for your
You too,
answers.
Carolyn. And I'll
Yeah,
see you in 2 weeks because we're going to go down to twice a month now.
I know. But that's okay because we still got you. And we love having you. Always great information, a lot of gratitude. Enjoy. And I'll see you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks, Carolyn.
Okay, bye. Bye,
Bye bye
everybody.
now.